There's a lie so many empaths have been sold, wrapped up in the language of healing, repeated so often in self-help spaces that it starts to feel like gospel. That protecting your peace means cutting everyone off, going no contact with anyone who's ever disappointed you, building walls so high that nothing painful can ever reach you again. And if you've been burned by a narcissist, if you've spent years giving everything you had to someone who took and took and took until there was nothing left, that advice can feel like relief. Like finally, someone is telling you it's okay to protect yourself. But here's what nobody tells you about that advice, and it's something I need you to really hear today. Cutting everyone off isn't peace. It's just a different kind of prison. And if you've been quietly wondering why you still don't feel free even after distancing yourself from everyone who's ever hurt you, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share might change everything about how you think about protecting yourself. Because real peace was never about isolation. Real peace is something far more sophisticated, far more sustainable, and far more powerful than simply removing every difficult person from your life. Real peace is a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned, refined, and mastered without requiring you to become someone who's alone in a beautifully boundaried, perfectly safe, completely empty life. So today, we're going to talk about 6 specific ways to protect your peace that don't require you to cut people off entirely. 6 ways that let you stay connected, stay compassionate, stay open to the world, while never again allowing anyone to drain you the way you were drained before. Let's start with the first one, because it might be the most important shift an empath can ever make. Number 1, learn to respond in delay instead of in real time. Here's something almost nobody talks about when it comes to narcissistic relationships. One of the most exhausting parts wasn't just what was said to you. It was how quickly you were expected to respond to it. Narcissists thrive on immediacy. They provoke and they expect an instant reaction because instant reactions are unfiltered, emotional, easy to manipulate. The moment you respond immediately, especially to something designed to hurt or confuse you, you're operating from your most reactive, most vulnerable self. Protecting your peace doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations forever. It means giving yourself permission to delay your response until you're actually ready to give one. This single shift changes everything because it removes the power dynamic that so many manipulative people rely on. The assumption that they control the pace of your emotional reactions. The next time someone says something that stings, that confuses you, that makes your chest tighten with that old familiar anxiety, try this. Instead of responding immediately, say, I need some time to think about that, and then actually take it. Not as a manipulation tactic, not as a punishment, but as genuine space to access your actual thoughts instead of your trauma response. This alone will transform how you interact with difficult people because it takes away their ability to catch you off guard, to provoke a reaction they can then use against you. You're no longer playing on their timeline, you're playing on yours. Number 2, stop explaining your boundaries. Just hold them. This might be one of the hardest lessons an empath ever has to learn, because everything in your nature tells you that if you just explain yourself well enough, thoroughly enough, compassionately enough, the other person will finally understand and respect what you need. But here's the truth that changes everything once you fully absorb it. Manipulative people don't need more information. They need less access. Every time you over-explain a boundary, you're essentially handing them a blueprint for how to argue against it, how to find the loophole, how to make you feel guilty enough to abandon it entirely. A boundary doesn't require a defense. It doesn't require a 20-minute justification, a bulleted list of reasons, an emotional appeal designed to make the other person understand your perspective. A boundary simply requires a clear statement and consistent follow-through. I'm not able to do that. Full stop. This conversation isn't something I'm willing to continue right now. Full stop. No elaborate explanation. No defending your right to have limits. Just clarity, delivered calmly, and repeated as many times as necessary without escalating into justification every single time someone pushes back. This protects your peace because it removes the exhausting labor of constantly defending your own needs to people who were never going to respect them anyway, no matter how eloquently you explained yourself. Number 3, separate access to your presence from access to your emotions. This is a distinction that changes everything once you understand it, and it's especially crucial for empaths who feel guilty about setting boundaries with difficult family members, coworkers, or old friends they're not ready to cut off completely. You can be in the same room as someone without giving them your full emotional investment. You can attend the family gathering without engaging every provocative comment. You can maintain a professional relationship with a difficult coworker without opening up your inner world to them, without hoping they'll finally understand you, without needing their approval or validation. This is what it actually means to stay connected without staying vulnerable to people who haven't earned that vulnerability. Your physical presence somewhere doesn't obligate you to hand over your emotional availability along with it. You can be polite, pleasant, even warm on a surface level, while keeping your deeper self reserved for people who have actually proven they can be trusted with it. Empaths often struggle with this because it can feel like dishonesty, like performing a version of connection that isn't fully real. But this isn't dishonesty. This is discernment. This is the difference between being present and being consumed. And once you master that distinction, presence without full emotional access, the next 3 ways to protect your peace become so much easier to actually apply because they build directly on that same foundation. Number 4, redirect instead of engage. This one sounds subtle, but once you start using it, you'll realize how much unnecessary emotional labor it saves you. Difficult people, especially those with narcissistic tendencies, often use conversations as a way to provoke, to test your limits, to pull you into arguments that go nowhere productive. And for years, you probably believed the only options available to you were either fully engaging, defending yourself, explaining your side, trying to reach some kind of resolution, or completely avoiding the person altogether. But there's a third option that almost nobody teaches, and it's incredibly powerful: redirecting the conversation without engaging the bait. If someone brings up an old argument, tries to provoke you with a backhanded comment, or attempts to pull you into a conversation you know will only leave you drained, you don't have to take it head on. You can simply redirect. I don't want to get into that right now, but tell me how work has been going. That's not something I want to discuss, but I'd love to hear about your trip. This isn't avoidance in the unhealthy sense. It's strategic redirection, a way of staying present and even friendly, while refusing to hand over your energy to a conversation designed to destabilize you. Over time, most people either learn to respect this redirection, or they reveal, through their persistence in ignoring it, exactly how little regard they have for what you're comfortable discussing. Either way, you gain valuable information without ever losing your composure. Number 5, protect your peace by managing your exposure, not your love. This might be the single most liberating reframe an empath can adopt, because it finally resolves the false choice so many people believe they're stuck with. Either you love someone fully, with total access to your time and energy, or you cut them off completely, protecting yourself, but also losing the relationship entirely. But love and exposure are not the same thing. You can love your difficult mother deeply, while limiting how often you see her to once a month instead of once a week. You can love an old friend who's become unreliable while no longer making yourself available every single time she calls in crisis. You can even, in some cases, still love a family member who's caused you real pain while simply deciding that holidays are the only time you'll be in the same space as them. This distinction is crucial because so much of the cut them off completely advice assumes that reduced exposure equals reduced love, and therefore anything less than total elimination is somehow a failure of self-protection. But that's simply not true. You are allowed to love people from a distance. You are allowed to care about someone's well-being while still protecting your own nervous system from constant exposure to behavior that destabilizes you. This reframe alone can relieve so much of the guilt empaths carry when they try to set limits with people they're not ready or don't need to eliminate entirely. You're not required to choose between total access and total elimination. There's an entire spectrum in between, and finding your specific place on that spectrum based on what actually protects your peace without requiring total isolation is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-protection there is. Number 6, let go of the need to be understood by everyone who hurt you. This might be the deepest, most difficult shift of all, because it goes against everything an empath's nature seems to want. You want to be understood. You want the people who hurt you, misunderstood you, or dismissed your feelings to finally see things from your perspective, to acknowledge the pain they caused, to validate what you went through. But here's the truth that finally sets so many empaths free once they fully accept it. Some people will never understand you, no matter how clearly you explain yourself, no matter how much evidence you provide, no matter how patient or articulate you are in trying to help them see your side. And waiting for that understanding before you allow yourself peace means handing them permanent control over your emotional state, indefinitely, based on a change in perspective that may never actually come. Real peace requires releasing the need for consensus about your own experience. You know what happened. You know what you felt, what you survived, what was real, regardless of whether the people involved ever validate that reality themselves. Your peace cannot be contingent on someone else's willingness to finally see things clearly, because that willingness is entirely outside your control, and building your emotional stability on something you can't control is a recipe for permanent unrest. This doesn't mean you stop caring about truth, or that you pretend everything is fine when it isn't. It means you stop needing external validation as a prerequisite for internal peace. You can hold your own truth firmly, privately, completely, without requiring anyone else to co-sign it. And here's what's remarkable about applying all 6 of these together, rather than any single one in isolation. They create something far more powerful than simple boundary setting. They create a kind of quiet, unshakable sovereignty over your own emotional world, one that doesn't require anyone else's cooperation, understanding, or change in order to function. This is what protecting your peace actually looks like when it's done right. Not isolation, not building an empty fortress where nobody can ever reach you again, but something far more nuanced, far more sustainable. The ability to stay engaged with a messy, imperfect world full of difficult people, while never again losing yourself in the process of loving them. And this brings us to something even more important than any individual strategy, something that ties all 6 of these practices together into a single, transformative truth about what peace actually requires. Peace was never about controlling other people's behavior. It was never about finally getting everyone in your life to treat you the way you deserve, to apologize adequately, to change permanently, to finally understand the depth of what their actions cost you. If that's what peace required, most empaths would spend their entire lives waiting for something that may never arrive, because you cannot control whether someone else ever grows, changes, or takes accountability. What these 6 practices actually build together is something entirely different. They build your capacity to remain steady regardless of what other people do, regardless of whether they apologize, regardless of whether they understand, regardless of whether they ever become the person you once hoped they'd be. This is the real definition of peace, and it's so much more powerful than the version most people chase because it doesn't depend on anything outside your own control. This is precisely why cutting people off, while sometimes necessary in extreme cases of ongoing abuse or genuine danger, isn't actually a requirement for most difficult relationships, because the goal was never to eliminate every imperfect person from your life. The goal is to become someone who can navigate imperfect relationships without losing herself in the process, someone whose internal stability doesn't rise and fall based on how well behaved everyone around her happens to be on any given day. Think about what this actually means for your life moving forward. It means you can attend the family dinner where your difficult relative makes a passive-aggressive comment, and instead of spiraling into hours of internal turmoil, you simply notice it, redirect if needed, and return home with your peace fully intact. It means you can maintain a friendship with someone who's let you down before, while protecting yourself through delayed responses and managed exposure, rather than requiring perfection as the price of continued connection. It means you can love people who have hurt you, even people who will probably hurt you again in smaller ways, without that love requiring you to sacrifice your own emotional well-being every single time. This is a fundamentally different way of moving through the world than the one you may have learned during years spent with a narcissist, where peace felt entirely dependent on managing someone else's mood, anticipating their needs, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their anger. That version of peace was never real peace at all. It was survival dressed up in the language of harmony, requiring you to disappear a little more each day in exchange for temporary calm. The peace we're talking about today is the opposite of that. It doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't require you to manage anyone else's emotions at the expense of your own. It doesn't require perfect people, perfect apologies, or perfect resolutions in order to exist. It simply requires you to develop the skills we've talked about today. Delayed responses instead of reactive ones, boundaries without endless justification, presence without full emotional access, redirection instead of engagement, managed exposure instead of total elimination, and freedom from needing to be understood by everyone who's ever hurt you. Master these 6 things, and something remarkable happens. You stop needing the people around you to be perfect in order to feel safe. You stop needing every difficult relationship to end in a clean, satisfying resolution. You stop needing anyone's permission, understanding, or validation to finally exhale. You simply become someone who can hold complexity, loving people while protecting yourself from them, staying connected while remaining sovereign, extending compassion while refusing to abandon your own needs in the process. This is what emotional maturity actually looks like on the other side of narcissistic abuse. Not becoming cold, not becoming isolated, but becoming so secure in your own worth, so skilled in your own protection, that the difficult people in your life simply lose their power to destabilize you the way they once did. And this, in the end, is the real gift hidden inside everything you survived. Not that you learned to cut people off, not that you built walls so high nothing could ever reach you again, but that you learned something far more valuable: how to stay open, stay loving, stay engaged with a beautifully imperfect world, while never again losing yourself in the process. That is what it truly means to protect your peace, not by disappearing from the world, but by finally fully showing up for it on your own terms with your own boundaries, carrying a peace that nothing outside of you can ever touch again.